Hey everybody, Dutch Sense here. 3:14 p.m. Central Time on Tuesday, May 31st, 2016. And I've got you looking at Earthquake 3D, which is a USGS feed of the most recent earthquakes. Right now we're looking at everything 4.0 and greater internationally and 2.5 and greater in the United States and territories. Now you can clearly see in the West Pacific we have a large amount of activity that's developed out from north of Japan and the Kuril Islands, south through Taiwan with a 6.4, started out as a 6.1 and was upgraded by the USGS. Then you see a series of 4s and 5s striking all throughout Indonesia and Philippines, going as far east as north of New Zealand, and a silent zone across Solomon Sea, and another silent zone across the whole country of Japan. And let me go ahead and turn this down so you can see that. Again, this is just the last 48 hours of activity. I'm going to go ahead and turn it down now for the last 7 days, and then you'll get an idea of what we're talking about here. We see a noticeable increase in earthquakes over the last week compared to the previous weeks. In addition to that, we also saw an ignoring of earthquakes from the USGS on several events that are not reported by the USGS, so you're not going to see them on the screen here now. But the events that do show, you can see the 4.8s down here in Australia, following the 5.9 that struck the week before, and a series of deep earthquakes that occurred here in the West Pacific, 6.0 and greater, striking at nearly 300 kilometers depth. And this then led to a series of shallower earthquakes to spread out all the way across the region that you can see here on the screen here now. In the United States, take a look at it. The edge of the craton moved from the west coast right in the spot that we were looking at. If you go back and watch last week's forecast, I'll put a link to it down below so you guys can watch it. You can hear us talk about watching for a 4 to 5.0 earthquake striking off the northwest coast of California, and exactly as we were expecting, a 4 to 5.0 earthquake did strike in northwest California, right along the coast. Also, 4.0, very rare, struck in Utah, and when you go look up the location, let's just go ahead and pull the coordinates on this really quick so you can see where it struck. Many of my viewers contacting me about this. Now, the pronunciation on that is Duchesne, but of course it does look somewhat like Dutch Sense. But when you zoom in on the area, I want to go ahead and show you guys what's there. I showed my viewers on my live stream. I'll put a link down below to the live streams where we have a chat room going and a live Earthquake 3D feed showing Earthquake 3D 24 hours a day. People chatting about it, but look what's right here. Just zoom in and show you. If you're a longtime viewer, you're already going to understand what this is. These are different gas and oil pumping operations. They call this fracking, where they'll inject water down into the ground to fracture the shale, and that then releases the gas, and they collect the gas in a gas collection process. So when we get back over to Earthquake 3D, 4.0 earthquake struck at that location. It was very rare. 2.5 to the north at Yellowstone, and volcanic earthquakes striking on the west coast. 3.5 near Cerro Prieto volcano. 2.7s to the north near Pisgah craters, and then we get up into California and Nevada. Let me turn the rings down here a little bit. Northwest California, Lassen, we're talking about volcanic fields, and all those locations were struck. Now the reason the pumping operations and the different dormant volcanoes are being struck on the west coast, we're seeing upwelling pressure come from down below. Now when I say down below, you can see the earthquakes raised high off the globe here. This is an Earthquake 3D feature to show us the depth of earthquakes. This lets us know that there's pressure coming from down below the plate in the West Pacific, and it's pushing up on the whole Pacific plate from down below in the West Pacific. And it's displacing us over here on the East Pacific, and we see a turnaround of earthquakes then push all the way to the east, and it's given away here again along the edge of the craton. I've talked about this in many videos going back several years showing the earthquake progression. You can see the heavier movement on the West Coast, pushing moderate movement in the Midwest, and then light movement to the east as it spreads out and pushes to the east. In Central America, the same thing happens. It pushes over to the east and releases mostly near Puerto Rico, and then further, whatever's left over, releases at the central mid-Atlantic ridge. Now, also, you'll see the 7.2 down here to the south of the South Sandwich Islands. And this is a stopping off point for the final pressure stopping off point. As we see earthquakes build along the west coast of South America, the earthquakes then spill under the plate. You see a few deep earthquakes occur here, and then whatever's left over, the pressure transfers down to here and releases. We talked about that last week in last week's forecast. telling people to watch for either a swarm or some kind of activity to develop down here that was noteworthy. Now, I was expecting a swarm of 5s. Instead, a single 7 struck, and now look what's happening there. It's fanning out on both sides, going to the east and to the west. Now, let's get into the forecast really quick. In Europe, in Asia, in the West Pacific, we have a few areas to watch. The way we do this, we turn this down for 48 hours. It reveals the spots to watch. We've already talked about the Solomon Islands, Solomon Sea, but let's just go over it again. We have a small stretch here east of Papua New Guinea, just west of Fiji, and we need to watch this location right in the bend for a possible larger release, at least 1 to 2 magnitudes larger than the deep movement nearby. This takes us up into the 6.0 range that could strike here. If it gets any larger, I'll have to issue a correction. But right now, the main threat that we're going to have to watch, at least over the next several days, is across the country of Japan. When you don't see activity across Japan over roughly 2 to 3 days' time, that lets you know there's pressure building in the area. Again, let me turn down the ring so you can see Japan. And the spots to watch, unfortunately, are going to be far south Japan near Tokyo and north central east Japan near the spot where we already saw the megaquake occur in 2011. And it could be 1 magnitude larger than the deeper movement nearby. Unfortunately, we have a deeper 6.4 striking to the south just north of Taiwan last night. And we see lateral movement occurring as far north as the Kuril Islands with a silent zone in between. And the silent zone is the country of Japan. Well, if it goes 1 magnitude larger, you can see here 6.4. If it goes 1 magnitude larger, that takes us up into the mid-7. If it goes 2, that takes us up in the mid-8. So I hope I'm wrong, and I hope it releases as a moderate swarm of 5s, let's say, 4, 5, 6, 10, 5.0 earthquakes, as opposed to a single 7. But when you see Japan silent, and you see this kind of movement happening all around there over the last 48 hours, again, take a look at it. Silent zone down here, and where else is there a silent zone? Where we normally see earthquake activity? Sumatra going up into India. Now this is India here, but their island chains reach all the way down here into Sumatra, Indonesia. You may remember Sumatra as the spot in 2005 that had the megaquake and 100,000 people or more were killed. And then in 2012, we saw 2 back-to-back near 9.0 earthquakes, mid-8, upper 8s, strike along the Indo-Australian plate here, and professionals came out and said that it was a new plate fracture occurring, and it was reaching on for hundreds of miles, and there was lateral and upward plate movement occurring, both right along through here. Now, there hasn't been any large release there, and again, let's take this down for the last 7 days. Still, last 7 days, USGS reported earthquakes. In an earthquake-prone area, you have movement to your south, heavy movement to your east, movement to your north across the Himalayan range, across Burma, Nepal, eastern China, western China, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan over here. Nothing to your south. Silence across western Indonesia, south central Indonesia, Sumatra, Indonesia, and eastern India. Well, that's not good. We don't like to see silence in earthquake-prone areas, especially when there's several nearby deep earthquakes and several shallow, larger earthquakes occurring. This lets us know the silent zones are prone. And there's only a few, luckily, in the whole West Pacific when we're talking about 15, 20,000 miles across an area, and we're only looking at 3 different zones right now for possible large-scale movement, and that should happen this week. Now, we will see movement spread over to the west across the Himalayan. Now, again, last 48 hours, you see silence across Nepal, Burma, Laos, going west to Afghanistan, nothing. But over to the east, all this activity. Well, again, this means the area is primed, and, of course, this takes us down into Laos, Burma, and Vietnam even. And when we back this out again, last 7 days, the area to the north has moved, but nothing to the south. You're primed and ready. It's silent. And if you get an earthquake in Vietnam, that will just be very rare because we haven't seen any large activity strike in Vietnam in a very long time. You got Thailand, Vietnam down here. You are primed and ready because of all your activity nearby, and it's been silent for so long. Now, in the United States, how do we determine the spots to watch? First, let me show you the last 7 days again. Whole edge of the craton moved all the way to the east coast just as expected. The reset button was hit, and now when we look over the last 48 hours, you could see the reset button was hit with just a few moderate earthquakes striking at where? Pumping operations and dormant volcanoes. Yet once again, west of Tahoe, 2.9, pumping operation just south of San Francisco, Also a 2.7 right off the coast of Los Angeles, which are technically gas extraction platforms. So, okay, so those are the 3 spots that were struck over the last 48 hours above 2.5. This lets us know as a warning sign again that we're seeing building pressure off the coast. Building pressure off the coast displaces these operations first. And we'll see these ramp up, and the higher in magnitude that these get, that means ultimately the magnitude off the coast will be larger as well. So if you start to see 2 and 3.0 earthquakes striking here, you look for 4 mid 4.0 earthquakes to strike off the coast. If you see 3 to 4.0 earthquakes striking down here, then you need to watch for mid 4 to mid 5.0, possibly even low 6.0 activity up to the northwest. Let's go ahead and show that to you again. You can already see the 4.5 struck, the 4.0 struck here over the past several days. Take it down. It's gotten quiet up there to the northwest, again letting us know that there's pressure building in the region, and it should release. Now, it should be in that 5.0 range. Now, where do we watch off the coast? It's a huge area to watch. Let's go ahead and nail this down to a small little stretch. We're talking about southeast Alaska, all these islands here, northwest Vancouver, British Columbia. Be on watch for that 5.0 range earthquake. Again, look at the silent zone in between. Let's turn it down for the full 7 days so you can see it's still been silent there. No large release. So 4.9 down here to the south, 4.5 down here to the south, 4.0 down here to the south. Multiple 4s to the north, even possibly a new building volcanic eruption. Again, a new building volcanic eruption is possible in Alaska. When you see this kind of activity, shallow and deep, see how they're raised all pretty much to the same depth off the globe? Maybe hard to see with just that. Let's turn it down for the last 48 hours. You see shallow earthquakes reaching upwards to those multiple deep earthquakes that are on the same depth level across 500 miles. Well, the whole area is upwelling pressure from down below. Usually that results in a new volcanic blast. So is it going to be at Cleveland or Pavlov, or is it going to be at a new volcano that hasn't erupted yet? When you see this kind of activity, it usually leads to volcanic eruption. We can't rule out a large earthquake, of course, but I'm leaning more towards Japan as the spot to watch. Again, we named the areas in Japan to watch, and we've already named the areas here in the west coast of the United States to watch. Remind everybody that we called for a 4 to 5.0 earthquake to strike off the coast of northwest California this week, and a 4.5 struck off the coast of northwest California this week. The reason that occurred is because of all the activity last week. Well, we're looking at it rebuilding again, but just a little bit to the northwest. This will then put pressure on the edge of the craton, and we're going to see new, renewed earthquakes striking across the fracking operations that'll get everybody's attention again. So we're talking about a renewed push from the northwest coming down here to the southeast, and that will cause new earthquakes in southern Colorado. Now we have to add in Utah near Dutchsinse, Utah. I mean, come on, when we go look it up in Duchesne, Utah, we have to add Utah back in the mix now, and that's getting up close to Yellowstone. Yellowstone's going to be back in the mix this week after we see movement off the coast, most likely. Sometimes it happens before it strikes off the coast, but usually it happens afterwards, and it's usually dictated the size at Yellowstone by the size off the coast. So if a 4 to 5 strikes there, then you watch for a swarm of 3s. 3s to 4 strike along Yellowstone going west into Idaho, also at the pumping operations down to the south. Well, Texas, you got hit just as expected. You can go look these earthquakes up. We're kind of getting long in the forecast here, so I'm not going to bother to show these to you. But you can go look them up and find out each one of them is at a fracking operation. You got struck just as expected. Let's turn it down for the last 7 days. The whole area moved just as expected. New Madrid seismic zone moved just as expected. Again, the leftover pressure that leaves here pushes to the east. And you can see 2.5 struck in the New Madrid, and then another 2.5 similar size, similar depth, struck up here to the northeast. And these were within a day of each other. When we get into international activity, then we start to talk about larger earthquake activity down here to the south again. There was one area that wasn't hit this past week from the past forecast. That was the Gulf of California to Mexico City. Now, just to the south, just to the north, moved just as expected. But we were expecting a mid 5.0 earthquake to strike Gulf of California to Mexico City. Now, why didn't it occur? I have no answer for you. I can only tell you that there's probably building pressure occurring here that's going to release with a larger earthquake than a mid 5. Because it didn't release this past week, and instead we have swarms now occurring on either side. Mexico City, normally primed and ready for an earthquake anyways, we would normally see 4 or 5.0 strike off the coast, and it's silent. So Gulf of California must be under serious pressure. and it most likely will release now off the coast. We'll throw Mexico City out of the mix for now and just go right along the coast. And it's a small stretch, maybe 100 miles that we need to watch in here. Not the whole region, just this 100 miles. And again, the reason I say that is it's right in between the 2 points that have already moved heavily. This then leads us into Central and South America. Let's turn down the rings and the date down to the last 48 hours to see our current activity. You can see Ecuador hit again, Colombia hit again, but it's not on the map here. USGS not reporting all kinds of earthquakes again, throwing off the total global count overall. But then we come in and zoom in and you see a 4.5 just struck there today in Colombia. And you can see, why wouldn't that be on the USGS? 4.5 not on the USGS feed, and they're doing that every single day, emitting dozens of earthquakes in the 4.0 range. Well, that throws off the count for everyone. And I don't want to hear anybody using USGS numbers anymore because they're not valid. You're going to have to use a combination of all the numbers and somehow remove duplicate earthquakes. In other words, the Europeans, USGS, Germans, Australians, New Zealand, you'll have to take all their earthquakes, combine them together, somehow throw out the duplicates, and that will then give you your real global count that's accurate. When they're omitting mid-4s that other agencies are reporting, it's insane when we would expect them to be on the 4.0 and greater earthquake feed from the USGS. So they just have a single 4.3 there over the last 24 hours. We know that's not accurate, but we'll just go ahead and show what they've got anyways. We do have a silent zone just to the south across Peru and North Chile. So this means North Chile is most likely the spot to be hit, since Peru was already hit over the last 7. Last week's forecast called for a mid-5 to strike in Peru, and look what happened. It had been quiet, and then the 5.2 struck right in the middle of Peru. So that released the pressure that we were expecting. But the area to the south, check it out. Look across North Chile. It moved all the way down to the south, but we have a little section in here. North Chile, Bolivia. We have deep earthquakes occurring below Bolivia now, reaching over towards Brazil. This is letting us know again that there's building pressure below the region, and that always comes from the West Pacific. Now the West Pacific, guys, look at it. The deep earthquakes over here were followed by a shallow, larger earthquake over in the East Pacific the next day. Now, the same thing happens over and over again, so when we see a large earthquake happen over here this week, you know it's going to cause compensation movement over to the east, and it's most likely going to strike in one of these silent zones, just like it did at the South Sandwich. So be on watch. The areas that we just named, watch out for at least 1 to 2 magnitudes larger than the largest movement we're seeing here now. That takes us up into the mid-6 range, upper 5, mid-6, most likely striking in this region here. Ultimately, it will all press down here to the east-southeast and again release this next week with a new swarm at the South Sandwich Islands. Central America will always press to the east and release the central mid-Atlantic ridge. And then over here in Asia, let's get into the Asia-Europe forecast. This will tie us off for the week. I don't have many viewers here, but I do like to do this just for coverage-wise so you can understand how earthquakes are progressing across the whole planet. You can see the line of earthquakes last 7 days, reaching from the West Pacific all the way across Asia, going across the Middle East, going into South Europe. Now you don't see any large earthquake activity you would normally see across Turkey. Let's say Turkey going into Iran, you would normally see some 4 and 5.0 activity, and we're not seeing any. Again, Turkey here, Iran here, and between the two, no activity. Caspian Sea right in between. This puts Caspian Sea into the mix, going west into Turkey, south into Iran, and we're going to have to watch for at least 1 magnitude larger than the activity we see on both sides. So you're going to have to combine these, the combined 4s, the combined 5s in between, stress building in between those two areas. Now let's turn on the EMSC last 50 earthquakes from the Europeans. This will show us our European earthquakes. And we've been paying attention to all those earthquakes that struck in Italy, also in France and Switzerland, going east into Romania, Serbia, Bosnia. Those were all struck this past week. We talked about that at length in the earthquake forecast last week. So what do we watch for over this week? Well, I would encourage you guys to go pull one of the coordinates on these earthquakes from Italy, and let's go look it up. Let's go see what's actually at the earthquake epicenter. Now, I did this on live stream yesterday. I wanted everybody to see what was there, but if you're a new viewer or you don't have time to watch the live streams, which are all recorded and put on my backup channel, which is linked down below in the description box below this video, Now when we back this out, this is Italy. Okay, you see this? Vulcini, it's a volcanic complex. It's very large. It hasn't erupted in roughly 2,000 years. And we have an earthquake swarm striking right next to it. Now, what causes this? Of course, we're talking about the same thing that happens in the rest of the planet. We saw deep earthquakes occur last week. You guys may remember. If you don't, go back and watch last week's video link below. And we're talking about the deep earthquakes that have occurred here in Italy that have now led to a new swarm breaking out at an ancient volcano. Upwelling pressure from down below in the asthenosphere coming up and causing pressure on the European plate. Now we got to look into this. We got to look into Switzerland. We have to look into CERN, the beam drops, teraelectron volts of power going to ground. Could it be causing earthquakes? It sure could be. Overall, let me just tell you guys, have an earthquake plan ready and be prepared. Don't be scared, be prepared. So just know what you'll do when you're inside of a structure and a large earthquake strikes. I had a viewer in chat yesterday saying, hey, my boss is going to Japan, and should they be prepared? I said, yes, they should be prepared this week for possible larger movement to strike. Again in that, I hate to say it, but again in that 6 to 7.0 range, most likely is going to strike in the region because both sides have moved and it's been quiet. So he needs to know what to do in case an earthquake strikes there that's large. Now we hope for a swarm, you hope for less, plan for more. So plan for the larger earthquake. If you live on the West Coast, you already know this, you know to have a plan. But I'm not telling you to buy stockpiles of food and water. You have to be mobile anyways for most of these things. So, just make sure you've got the bases covered for minimum survival for a few days' time. Food, water, transportation, self-defense, communications. You may not even need the self-defense part depending on where you are. And food and water can be basics. You don't have to have the whole supermarket stored up for survival for a year. And especially when other people are going to need your help. So you might want to have some survival stuff that includes maybe some hardware that you would use to dig people out. Hammers, saws, that kind of stuff. And you may not need to save your neighbor. You might be needing to save a loved one or a pet. And you'll wish you had that crowbar or that handsaw even. You say, damn, if only I would have had my saw and a little car charger. Then I could have cut them all out and saved their life. I mean, that's the kind of stuff you need to plan for now. And it's invaluable when those things occur. It's too late once it occurs, and that's why we say plan now, plan for the worst, but hope for the best. So guys, much love. Thanks for sticking in there, and of course, check into the live stream. Let me just go ahead and show that to you here really quick while I got you on here. The way to get to it, you go to my Dutch Sense channel, the one everybody knows, and it'll say live now down here below. Oh, we got a 360 video out too where the cat came up on the birds in the garden yesterday. It was pretty cool. But yeah, you just click on it, and what you'll see is the globe. So you got a chat box, or we can go ahead and play it. There we go, chat box on the right. I got a little bit of music playing, and then we've got myself down here in the lower left-hand corner here, and I'm going to go ahead and give it a wave. It's running probably about 30 seconds behind an actual live stream, and we'll just let that play through. But I'd just like to say thanks to everybody who's been in here. We've had a steady 30 to 100 people, 40 to 100 people, and of course people give me thumbs up. Every time I restart it, by the way, it just keeps giving me the same thumbs up and the same URL. So I just resume it, and it resumes on its own. YouTube saves a copy supposedly every 12 hours. So there's 12-hour segments of the chat going by, and when an earthquake strikes, you can fast forward through. You can just move your mouse through here. And if you come in here and it's live, you can move your mouse back like 2 or 3 hours. Now there I am waving. That lets you know how far behind we are. So I'm roughly a minute behind in actual time here, and you can see I'm on live now. Or here, let's move this forward. It'll be live, and I'll say red live down below here. So it's been a little bit of a process getting this going. Let me tell you guys, it's been, oh, we won't even go there. But much love to everybody who's been here. Of course, I answer questions in here from time to time when I can, and people can see when I'm coming in and out. You can see when I'm at the helm, when I'm away, and I just appreciate everybody that's made this possible. I couldn't have done any of this without you guys helping me get going for the summer
and to do the experiments and to set up the laboratory the way I want it downstairs, and for the computers, to have multiple computers running a live stream, new internet connection, new cameras, that kind of stuff, actually, I could never do on my own with my regular real-life job. No way. So I just appreciate it, man. Thank you so much to everybody who's helped. Be safe.